ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Attaining the Second Cognition. I'm Gemma Beall. Today, I'm sitting outside amongst the trees out in nature doing this recording and hoping that it sounds much better than the echo that comes from inside. But you're probably going to hear some city noises as well, so please forgive me for that because I have no control over everybody else. Anyway, Endel and I would like to say thank you to all of our subscribers that have joined us on our journeys, and we want to welcome you all to today's presentation. Our presentation is going to be about programs, perceptions, and distractions. These may seem like three separate topics, but as with everything else in this universe, they're heavily interwoven into the indoctrinated fabric of our lives, and it's far past time to unravel the rug. There are many things that have been the primary focal point in my mind over the last 4 or 5 months, though until now I didn't really know how to put it into words. It seems the more I've pulled my consciousness away from the first cognition, the more difficult time I have using first cognition words and concepts to make this information understandable for everyone else. Endel coined the term second cognition to separate the levels of perceptual and cognitive awareness from how everyone operates in general. There's a lot of people that firmly believe that they have attained the second cognition level of awareness because they can see all that's wrong with humanity at large. But to be perfectly honest, not many people have achieved this level of awareness because there's so much more to it than just merely recognizing the horrors of the first cognition reality. Second cognition isn't just about being able to recognize in your mind how you're being controlled and manipulated, not internally nor externally. There's an energetic feel to the shift that takes place within the consciousness of those that have attained it. Second cognition is a slow process of elevating your perceptual and cognitive awareness beyond the constraints of the world, both inside and external to your form and consciousness. There are many phases of elevated perceptual and cognitive awareness one goes through on their personal journeys, but a lot of people stall in the higher levels of awareness, still trapped in the first cognition, mostly because of the 3 topics I'll be discussing today. In my earlier video, I talked about the necessity of introspection on the spirit path, but as I found with my own journey, my initial introspection was extremely glossed over by my own filters. This is what held me back from attaining second cognition. Once I began to remove the filters and was able to embrace a better view of my internal workings, that's when I was able to shift out of first cognition into second cognition. What I'm sharing in this video are the baby steps to my internal study of my own mind. I'm aware that it may seem simplistic, but I can tell you from a higher level of perceptual awareness, it's some profound stuff once you get to the other side. The first topic today is programming or programs or a program, however you want to think about it. But before I start talking about it, I want to pull out the first cognition definition of the word program. As with most words in English, program has several meanings. The definitions are, as a noun, a planned series of future events, items, or performances. 2, a sheet or a booklet giving details of items or performances at an event or a performance. As a verb, provide a computer or other machine with coded instructions for the automatic performance of a particular task. 2, arrange according to a plan or schedule. These definitions are fairly good at defining what a program is as first cognition nouns and verbs, but it doesn't accurately reflect what I'm referring to where programs are concerned from second cognition. The definition in what I'm going to talk about would more accurately be defined as a set of instructions for automatic performance or a particular task or event. Now you may say, wait a minute, Gemma just gave the same definition that she said it doesn't accurately describe a program. The fact of the matter is, I used the same words almost verbatim. However, the context and meaning in what I said varies from the other meanings by perceptions. For all intents and purposes, these physical bodies are computers. The definition in which I speak is not limited to strictly computers as we understand them, our physical bodies, energy, nor is it strictly limited to past, present, or future. So when I say the word program, programs, or programming, I'm simply referring to a set of instructions. The manner of computing or storing the instructions can vary greatly in this universe. It is not just limited to Earth 3D metal and mineral computers. There's nothing in creation, and I do mean nothing, that isn't the product of a program. If you look at nature, animal instinct, including human, is a product of instructions within the genetic code of the form. Fight or flight is a coded instruction to the body that causes a surge of hormones within the form, giving the form instructions, not necessarily our consciousness, of how to respond to a situation, and through psychological associations can also cause a reaction within the mind from programmed learning or experiences. We've used this term frequently in our work, and each instance that we use it may be talking about different types of programs, but the overall meaning is a set of instructions. Our perceptions are the product of a program. Since the day we're born, we are literally told by others the labels or words, instructions, that describe the world around us. We are programmed how to act by instructions from others on what is considered good behaviors and bad behaviors. Our mere consciousness is a product of instruction by whatever entity or thought that set the instruction for the consciousness to be separate and evolve. There is nowhere that we can turn in this reality or any other that we will not be a product of programming or of a program. The thing is, from first cognition, this prospect is very scary, but to someone in second cognition, we understand that programs are not always bad, but are necessary in creation, especially when you stand on your own and make the conscious choice to be the programmer of your consciousness and the programmer of your life. At current, in the first cognition world, the consortium is the programmers of the first cognition reality. When you buy into their programming, you become a product of their programming. When you remove yourself as a product of their programming and begin to reprogram yourself with your own program, it doesn't matter if you participate in first cog reality, you are following your own set of programmed instructions that keeps your consciousness and your emotional energies out of the mix of the program reality of others. Another way of viewing this would be an artist. An artist creates art. Sometimes the art is a painting or a photograph or music or a sculpture or even written works. Each creation by the artist is a product of their programming creation. Let's look at music as an example. In order to create a song, someone has to think of the words and then they have to choose a melody for their song. This means that musical instructions has to be written for the different instruments. Each element of composition is in fact a program because it's a set of instructions for the song to come into creation. The instructions for the singer are different from the instructions for the drummer, which is also different from the instructions from the bass player and guitar or any other instruments. If the artist or collaborative artists make any alterations to the music or words once it has been created, any alterations is a revision in the program. Even if someone else comes along after the fact and takes the song and makes alterations, they are reprogramming someone else's work. If you take this analogy and apply it to universal principles, one can see how this creation is literally a product of a program with programming and reprogramming continually taking place. The creation of this reality was altered and reprogrammed by others when they created programs that have altered the original program to something controlling and negative for all of us to experience as it is now. If you have ever put yourself to the task of creating something, then you can understand what kind of mental thought and instruction goes into creating. You will also understand that the first set of instructions may not be suitable for your intended creation, so there are times when reprogramming is necessary. With this world right now and the people in it, it definitely needs reprogramming away from the control and manipulation by others. The next topic I'm going to talk about is perceptions. We've had several videos talking about changing perceptions and how one's perceptions shift as they raise their awareness, and we've even talked about people rooting in their perception or their perspective and losing fluidity of their consciousness in the process. I want to address here more about what perceptions are and how they're molded or programmed within our minds, and how we as programmers to our own realities and consciousness have the control within us to move past perceptions that no longer serve our spiritual growth so they do not become soika inhibitors. The definition of a perception is the ability to see, hear, or become aware of something through the senses, or a way of regarding, understanding, or interpreting something, a mental impression. These two definitions are not incorrect in the least, but from a first cognition perception, they're very limited to second cognition understanding and realization. A perception is a mental impression, however, not all perceptions are valid. Now, before you start arguing that I'm wrong about this, let me ask you, how many times have you seen something, heard, or felt something with your primary five senses and formed a perception and then came to a conclusion about what you experienced, only later to obtain more information and realize that you totally misperceived it? In my book, Advanced Teachings, I share this example of a misperception. I saw this commercial where a guy walks into his kitchen with a bag of groceries and takes the food out to begin cooking. In the kitchen is a big fluffy white cat. The cat jumps on the counter and knocks the spaghetti sauce off the stove, then jumps into it as the guy is cutting up the chicken. The cat is now covered in spaghetti sauce, looking all bloody I might add, and he grabs the cat by the scruff of the neck in one hand while he still has the really large knife in his other. In that moment, a woman walks in and the look on her face was one of horror. The commercial then says in bold print, "Things are not as they seem." If this had been a real situation, what do you think the mental impression, or the perception, was that the woman formulated based off of what she saw? If you were in that situation, what would your perception be? We are programmed not only by words, but also by observation to formulate perceptions with only a minute amount of information, and most of the time, once we form a perception, we root there for the rest of the time. I've heard many people say that there's no such thing as a wrong perception, but I disagree with that statement. If the woman's perception was that the man had just brutally murdered her cat, wouldn't that be a wrong perception? One of the definitions of wrong is not correct or true. In this case, the perception would in fact be wrong. However, not all incorrect perceptions, or misperceptions as I call them, are in fact wrong. They are limited points of view. Why are they limited? Because not enough information was obtained and not enough information was known to formulate a valid and correct perception. If you notice, I include not enough information was known in this equation because although what you see and the perception you formulate in your mind is one thing, more information can and will in most cases alter your perception unless you completely disregard the additional yet necessary information. I've used the following analogy to explain expanding a perception. I hear a knock on my door. What's the first thing that comes into my mind? Ooh, somebody's at the door. This is a perception, but is it an accurate perception? More than likely it is, because something had to knock on the door and the odds that it's anything other than a human is low. This knowledge is pre-existing information programmed by pre-existing experiences. But who's knocking behind the door? I could sit there and guess, or I could simply get up and go to the door. I look out my peephole and I see my neighbor Fred. So now with this new visual information, I see that Fred is knocking at my door. My perception alters from someone is knocking on my door to my neighbor Fred is knocking on my door. That would be an accurate perception because I've seen him through the peephole, new information, to know who is knocking at my door. Do I know what my neighbor wants? No, but I can perceive that he wants to talk to me. I mean, why else is he knocking on my door? But beyond that, any other mental impression is merely speculation. I open the door and sitting at Fred's feet is a dog. Until I opened the door, I had no way of perceiving that there was a dog with neighbor Fred. Now that I see neighbor Fred with a dog, and I know personally that Fred doesn't have a dog and doesn't like dogs, previously known information, I can perceive that he might be asking if the dog is mine, but no. I know Fred knows I don't own a dog, also previously known information, so I can make an assumption that Fred is wanting to talk to me to ask if I know who the dog might belong to. Until that conversation happens, my perception is a mere assumption. Will my assumption be a correct perception? Fred asked me to come outside to meet our new neighbor. I walk out past my porch and I see a strange man standing in my yard. I had no way to perceive this strange man in my yard until I walked out of my house, new information. Fred introduces me to Barney, the strange man, and his dog Jack, and explains that they are new to the neighborhood and the movers lost all of their furniture and everything will be delivered in the morning. Barney and his wife are going to have to stay at a hotel until the next day, but the hotel doesn't allow pets, so Fred was hoping I would be able to house Jack for the night since I had a fenced backyard and no other dogs. My first perception came when Fred knocked on the door. My second perception came when I looked through the peephole. My third perception came when I opened the door. My fourth perception came once I went into my yard and saw the neighbor. Any perceptions I made in those moments were more than likely not accurate perceptions, but each instance, more information was delivered to me in order for me to alter my initial perceptions if necessary. But did I choose to alter my perceptions as I gained more information? In this case, I did. We all have encounters or situations daily where we formulate perceptions based off of what we gather through our five senses and what we have in our minds with stored information, experiences, and previously held perceptions. This information, experience, and previously held perceptions becomes the filters that we use to process any new information obtained through our primary five senses to form new perceptions. Do you see how you do this throughout your life? Do you see how you do this in gathering new information? Now, carry this further into your mind and contemplate how this information pertains to you and how you formulate perceptions in your own mind where your experiences, your higher senses, and consciousness information is concerned. The last topic I'm going to discuss is distractions. If you look at the 3D world around us, we are all surrounded by distractions almost every second of every day. These are not the kind of distractions I'm going to talk about. I'm going to be talking about things that distract our focus from our path. Now, with this being said, I want to ask, how many people are distracted by the crickets that are singing in the background? Is that something that should be a distraction to begin with? Think about that. Distraction has two definitions if you look up the word. They are a thing that prevents someone from giving full attention to something else and extreme agitation of the mind or emotions. These definitions are exactly what I will mean when I talk about distractions. In a recent conversation, I was told that even information can become a distraction. At first, I didn't see how this was possible, especially with information being necessary to expand perceptions, especially where it pertains to consciousness. But as I contemplated the meaning of it, I began to understand exactly how information can be a distraction, and this I know from personal experience all along my path. In my book, The Energy Experience, I recounted my experience with things like tarot cards. I discovered these tools early on my path and messed with them for years trying to figure them out. Even though I received a lot of intuitive information when I used the cards in and of themselves did not give me the information I received intuitively. My Soika did, or my traits did. I misperceived that it was the cards that gave me the information for years. I spent probably 6 months to a year being distracted by the information about the cards and the cards themselves instead of focusing my attention on my traits and my intuition. This is a prime example of how those cards and the information about the cards were a distraction for me, and that my perceptions based on false information were the basis of the distraction. Another thing that can and does become a distraction for those on their paths is where their traits are concerned. There are a lot of people that have traits like I do, and there are a lot of people that don't. A lot of people that do not have these traits will spend useless time and energy distracted with whining that they don't have these traits. This distraction diverts their attention away from discovering and honing the traits that they do have. I've fallen prey to this, and I've seen many others that have done the same. The biggest distraction that I see where the spirit path is concerned, and this was also an observation of myself as well as seeing it in others, is the distraction of information out there in the New Age or consciousness studies or conspiracy facts. If you look at all our previous videos, we spent plenty of time ourselves studying and researching all the ways that we are controlled and manipulated by society at large over many decades. The time we've invested in this arena far outweighs the time we spent focusing on our Soika and our own continued growth if we were to measure them against each other. But there comes a time that once you've figured out the control and manipulation, you must disconnect and disengage from it, or else you are only feeding that system because that is what you've been programmed to do. Continuing to harp on it becomes a distraction to keep you from focusing on yourself and your growth, and keeps you tied to that system and prevents your journey towards second cognition. Perceptions can also be distractions on the spirit path. I've seen many comments from others like, "Oh, I don't need to listen to somebody else's experience because I have everything I need within." I also hear the same people whining because they're stuck on their path, and I myself have said it and have whined in the same manner. We've been programmed to perceive things in certain ways, and there are those of us that have opted to turn our focus within for answers, and this is what everyone should be doing. However, the information we've been provided with, the quote-unquote ancient information, doesn't give us enough valid information to know where to begin looking deeper or the questions to ask within ourselves in order to obtain greater information. So the perception that one cannot benefit from hearing the perspective of another about their personal experiences serves as a great distraction that can prevent one from hearing new information that would give them a greater area to consider internally where their own path is concerned. Many people end up on a spiritual path because they have an internal push to pursue it. Some people pursue a spiritual path because they perceive it as the cool thing to do, and those people typically either quickly fall off their paths or something distracts their attentions and they fall back into 3D life habits. For those of us that have the internal push, we quickly learn that our paths are not easy and are fraught with many hazards, especially with the material that is out there about it. One of the main reasons Endel and I have chosen to share our paths and what we've learned with others is because we learned on our paths that a majority of the information out there was bullshit. When I say something is bullshit, this doesn't mean that it's not true in all cases. The definition means talk nonsense to someone, typically to be misleading or deceptive. There's a lot of truth out there, but it's mixed with so much misleading and deceptive information that it's very difficult to decipher what is truth, what is half-truth, and what is outright lies or programs created specifically to keep people roped into false beliefs. Endel and I, individually and collectively, have been down all the roads on our paths, and there is nothing that we share in our work that we haven't fell prey to or been distracted by on our quest for raised conscious awareness. It is only in embracing it wholeheartedly and then going within with the information that we embraced that we've learned what we're sharing here. The reason we choose to share with others is because we wish we would have had somebody like us to tell us these truths that we share. Just because you might not personally perceive what we share as truth doesn't mean that it hasn't rang true on our paths in the form of a knowing, not a perception. All of these topics, as I stated in the opening, weave together in a tapestry of control. I've explained enough about them for an overall picture of what they are, but I'm not going to tell you how they weave together. As we've stated, we're sharing with you to give you a point of consideration where your path is concerned, and we also stated that we're trying to show others how to become their own authority. You can only become your own authority by considering this information within your mind and coming to your own conclusions about the information. So, if you're serious about your personal growth and advancement, here are some questions for you to consider within and see if you could formulate in your mind how all three of these topics weave together. How do I formulate my perceptions and why? What role does programming, internal and external, play in how I form my perceptions? What are the things that distract me from my personal cognitive and perceptual growth? How do programs, sets of instructions, perceptions, mental impressions, and distractions, diversion of attention and focus, play a role in my life where my journey is concerned? How do these make a tapestry of control over my life? I want to thank everyone for taking the time to listen and consider the information, and hope you join Endel and I next time. Until then, take care.